Beatles were gritty. They were tough, okay? Do that, okay? That's your theme. Tough and gritty and simple and honest, guys, okay? So just keep it like that, raw, because that's what we want to see. Just the Beatles, okay? I'm not going to say the Beatles in the raw, but yeah, we want to see that too. Hi, I'm Jackie, and welcome to my bower. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the four Sam Mendes Beatles biopics that are supposed to be coming out sometime in 2028. I've already talked about movies 1, 2, and 3, and that's Ringo, John, and Paul in my world, to my way of thinking, and in just my opinion, as a loving fan and not a Beatles expert or a Beatles historian. It's just what I'd like to see, what I think works best, just me. What I'd like to see mainly is some truth and authenticity with the Beatles because that's what they were about. Honesty and keeping it real, just kind of keeping it simple and not really telling a narrative and just not really explaining it to you either. There's plenty of plenty of examples of that. It's like, what does this song mean? What does that mean? Well, no, just kind of do the same thing. Just let us figure it out. If there's stories to tell that we don't know about, great, let's see that. But only if they matter. We don't need to go down any crazy roads or streets that aren't necessary. We don't need any like loose ends or crazy characters added either. We just want their characters. We just want them. We want to see what makes John, Paul, George, and Ringo tick. If at all possible, I want to see them as kids. I want to see them as teens, their friends, their family, them falling in love with music, what their dreams were, what they did. They had a pretty rough childhood. They had to make their own entertainment. They had to be creative. They grew through that. They expanded their world through that creativity. And that's what I'd like to see. What drove them and all the mistakes and the heartaches that they went through, all the people that they knew, all the people that they loved, the fights they got into, the trouble that they got into, the choices that they made. It's all very interesting. And, this just what they did. I don't need anything added. Okay. Just like, with Star Wars. Okay. The original Star Wars, super duper. It's just the characters and the story. You love Luke, Leia, and Han. You love, C-3PO and R2-D2. You love Ben. You love Chewbacca. You love all those guys, okay? But, do you love some of the new characters? I mean, I don't think so. At least I don't. Okay, you don't need to add any Jar Jar Binks in the Beatles movie. We don't need added characters that are just a distraction. You don't need to play games. Just like keep it real. Of course, we need special effects probably, and that's just fine. But, I'd like to see like that. Keep it gritty. Keep it real. Keep it stark. Maybe they can change it, from maybe that in the early days, maybe a little bit better look, as you kind of progress back into nitty gritty as you get into the late 60s and the early 70s as it gets kind of gritty again. That's just the arty me kind of talking there, what I'm thinking about. But again, just strip it down to these guys, their characters, what they did, how they interacted with each other, who they were as real life people. And that's all we need. And the people around them. The time they spent in Hamburg was pretty much the only time that all four of them look back fondly on. It was a very formative time. It defined them. They were free. They were really coming into their own as young men, as rockers, as the Beatles. Everything was possible, and pretty much anything was possible, and they could get away with a lot of stuff. And so they did a lot of stuff, and they became a lot of stuff, and that aura began to glow and just stayed there and never stopped. This is what attracted everybody to them and why everybody just fell in love with him, like Klaus fell in love with him, Mal fell in love with him, Astrid, Neil, Brian Epstein, George Martin. I mean, everybody. I mean, just about anybody who kind of came into their universe was like, whoa, what's going on here? I got to get close. I mean, we all feel it. And it's not because of some gimmick or anything like that. I do feel like it's the music, obviously, what they did, that expression of themselves, that extension of themselves, their music. But I always like to say, come for the music and stay for the love. What they were like these 3, 4, 5 dimensional people that had so much going on in them all the time. They were just loaded up full of what they wanted to do, what they wanted to say. We're going to do this. We're going to break some rules. We're going to do this in Hamburg. We're going to do this in the studio. We're going to do this in the concert. We're going to do this in the States. We're going to do this different in the studio. We're going to do whatever we want to do. And that, I think, is, the music. Let's hear some music, super duper. But it's the guys. So let's focus on the guys and their character. Can I say that enough? And, speaking of the guys, what about the gals? Okay, the wives and the girlfriends. They deserve a little bit of justice too. Not just John, Paul, George, and Ringo's story needs to be told. Their partners that were there for them, that wanted to be part of their lives, but weren't always a part of their lives. And the struggles that they went through and the choices that they had to make and what they went through and experienced and what they discovered about themselves having to deal what they had to deal with. These women didn't sign up for this stuff. They didn't know what was happening. Okay, nobody knew. Nobody knew what was going to happen. They figured, okay, maybe he's going to be gone sometimes, but okay, that's just how it's going to be. Wouldn't that have been nice? Well, it wasn't like that. So let's do the gals justice in these stories. Let's really solid telling of them and their experiences and the consequences of being a Beatle wife or a girlfriend. Wasn't easy. And the Beatles didn't find being a Beatle easy either. They just found themselves there. They thought they wanted to go there. And they had these experiences. It was kind of taking them along. Paul said it was like the eye of the storm. John referred to it as like a hurricane. It just swept them away. And like, we're not in control of this anymore. Things are just happening. And you just ride that wave as best as you can, and you crash and burn sometimes. And that definitely happened now and then. So we need to see that. And what they did is they had to cling to each other. So they most likely became a lot tighter before everything kind of fell apart. And so there's definitely going to be a lot of heartache here, and we don't need to add to it. You don't need to do anything really maudlin or crazy. Just keep it real, because real is enough with these guys. I mean, their life, what they had was almost unreal anyway, okay? So let's kind of bring it down to earth, bring their stories down to earth, let them touch grass. And that way we can get in touch with them as well. We can feel for them even more, maybe get to know them a little bit more, but probably not. We're never going to know what they went through. We're never really going to know them. We're probably never going to really know the truth about things. So please, but you just don't need to convolute the truth that we do know. Their lives, they packed so much into their lives, and that's why I said that each of these movies needs to be 4 hours long, and I really don't care what anybody else thinks. I think if you think that's a marketing problem, well, that's your problem, because I don't think that was a problem for the Beatles when they wrote Hey Jude. Okay, that really broke a lot of norms. So break some norms here. Make 4-hour movies because they deserve it. I mean, it's extra special. Don't make it like a director's cut or anything. Put the director's cut out there. Release it. Put it all out there. I think it would be magic that way. You would, new territory there. Everybody would go to see it, and we're going to go see it because it's real. Not because there's special effects or gimmicks or narratives. We're going to go see these movies because there's a lot to see, a lot to experience, and a lot to feel. And that's what's missing in a lot of stuff out there is there's not enough of reality out there. And that was what is so great about the Beatles and why we keep clinging to them is because they were real. And I know I keep saying that word a lot, but it's important and maybe they will take note. Maybe I'm saying it too much. You can just never get enough truth, and I can just never get enough Beatles. But, I can hope. But as a real Beatles fan, I'm always going to want more. So maybe the movies can end leaving us wanting just a little bit more. I mean, we're always going to want more from them. Uh, and so don't answer all of the questions. Let us kind of think, probably, conjecture. All the little I's don't need to be dotted and all the T's don't need to be crossed to make this movie good. Okay, there's a lot of undiscovered territory with the Beatles. There's things were not neatly tied up in a bow. It was messy. So these need to be like messy, big, emotion-filled, character-driven movies that have a great soundtrack, okay? You don't need to add stuff. The recipe is there for it to be a winner and special and something movies that have never been done before. You have it all there. Do it right. Let's end these movies on sort of a hopeful note where there's plenty of potential and more story to tell. And that's around 1973, where they're pretty much over their Beatles hangover. They are getting to know themselves a lot more without, everybody else being around them. Yeah, they still have each other around some of them. Okay, so what was that like? Ending on a happy note in their own way, and that's happy. Them being able to have new worlds to discover, new things about themselves to explore, new things to say. It is like starting over again. And, that's a happy ending. Good for them. Thanks so much for being here with me. And until next time, peace and love one another. Beatles didn't need the norms. Just go for it. Be true to the Beatles. Get rid of the 2-3 hour movies. Go 4. 4 in all one sitting. Okay, maybe you can have an intermission. I'm okay. If you gotta have an intermission, that's fine. Play some Beatles music during the intermission. That's fine. Okay, I can't even talk.